As early pioneers of the Midwest emo genre, Sunny Day Real Estate created an image, sound, and attitude that would come to define one of indie rock's most prolific offshoots. Formed in 1992 by guitarist and lyricist Dan Hoerner, bassist Nate Mendel, and drummer William Goldsmith, later joined by lead vocalist, guitarist, and lyricist Jeremy Enigk, their 1994 debut album, Diary, has come to be seen as a landmark release in 90s indie, containing equal moments of tranquil beauty and aggressive instrumentation, bolstered by introspective and poetic lyrics penned by Enigk and Hoerner. The band would release a second, technically untitled LP in 1995 before disbanding, and drummer William Goldsmith and bassist Nate Mendel would be acquired to play in Dave Grohl's Foo Fighters project. In 1997, Enigk and Hoerner were approached by the band's former label, Sub Pop, to potentially release the band's demos and rarely circulating single tracks as an album. The project's inception caused a reunion of Sunny Day Real Estate, sans Mendel, who remained in Foo Fighters, and while this Rarities project never saw the light of day, this reunion still proved to be fruitful. On September 8, 1998, the band released their third studio album, How It Feels to Be Something On, an album that showed the massive growth in maturity, musicianship, and lyricism from the returning members, as well as a new direction that would incorporate elements of post-rock and progressive rock. Today, we're going to take a look at it. Oh man, don't you love the feeling of suddenly discovering something new in the music from bands you've been a fan of for a long time? I say this because I've been an outspoken Sunny Day Real Estate fan for about 4.5 years at this point, but I gotta admit, most of that fandom came from the band's first album, Diary. I had heard LP2 or the Pink album once in 2020, but outside of the song 5-4, I didn't really feel a massive connection to it. Sure, the music itself was still interesting, but it didn't have me in a grip like Diary did. And considering I view Diary as the crown jewel of emo, a record so perfect in its execution, sequencing, and emotional depth, it felt like a letdown in some way. But to make a long story short, in the process of collecting CDs for both my personal collection and to listen to in my car, I stumbled across a copy of LP2 earlier this year at a record store for about $4. I'd had Diary on CD for about 3 years by this point, so I said, sure, why not? I have to listen to it anyway. That subsequent re-listen, whenever it ended up happening, on my way to and from work one morning, blew my mind wide open and made me realize I've been sitting on a potential gold mine of a discography, only paying attention to one record for 4 years. Naturally, I finally listened to How It Feels to Be Something On sometime after this, and I began to wonder why I had put this album off for so long. In most circles, it's just as respected as Diary is, and sometimes I saw more fans of this record than I did for Diary. Maybe I was afraid because, I'll admit, at first I thought Pillars was a really good song, but not the career-defining magnum opus that I'd been seeing it claimed as. Well, I listened to the record and I really liked it. It wasn't as strong as LP2 maybe, but this was in the midst of a rabid obsession with that record. I doubt there were going to be many records that I could have heard that would have hit on that level at that time. Either way, over time, my opinion of How It Feels slowly grew and grew and grew until it eventually boiled over, and I realized it might be the best album they'd ever made. Now, don't get me wrong, eventually, and I mean eventually, I will review Diary, LP2, and even The Rising Tide, along with these several other albums I've either made promises to review or that I should have reviewed by now because of personal importance and the fact they're from my favorite artists. But I think my thoughts on this record need to be documented and spilled as quickly as possible. This record turned Sunny Day Real Estate into a band I had a large appreciation for, to one of my favorite bands in general. Something very strange and very spiritual has gotten into me with this record. Perhaps the most prominent element of my infatuation with this record comes from its context. Sunny Day Real Estate broke up in early 1995, due in part to Jeremy Enigk's wish to leave the band and practice devout Christianity, owing to a spiritual awakening sometime in 1994. Following this, however, he made a solo album in 1996 titled Return of the Frog Queen, produced by Greg Williamson, who also produced this album, that completely removed Enigk from the aggressive instrumentation and scratchy and whiny vocals that permeated Diary and LP2. And yes, for the record, I will review Return of the Frog Queen eventually as well. On Frog Queen, Enigk opted for an orchestral backdrop to his acoustic performances, inadvertently helping to pioneer a style that would become more prominent in the 2000s and 2010s. His lyrics are just as poetic as before, but with more emphasis placed on an existential kind of spirituality. In my mind, Return of the Frog Queen is the perfect bridge between LP2 and How It Feels to Be Something On because of this. And it comes as no surprise to me that both Frog Queen and How It Feels have had a personal impact on me because of my own spiritual questioning as of late. I don't particularly want to divulge every detail, but religion has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember, and I began having some thoughts late last year that felt answered by Jeremy's songwriting and his own spiritual journey. It's made me realize that I can still spiritually feel a certain way without devoting entirely to an institution. If I ever get the chance to meet Jeremy, or by some odd chance he comes across this video, I just want to say thank you to him. His work has done more for me in the last 6 months of my life than most music has done for me in a long time. And that is saying something because I attach emotional importance to basically all of my favorite music, which I keep discovering. However, with all of that being said, I want to finally discuss the music contained within this beautiful, masterful record as concisely and consistently as I can, going through each track in order. And for the record, I don't know how much justice I can really do regarding the meaning of these songs or any other Sunny Day songs. Their lyrics are so open-ended in many cases that I tend to make my own interpretations, so I just wanted to make that clear if it seems like I might misunderstand the words. I try to stay as aligned as with what the songwriters assign to the lyrics, but with these guys, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, and I say that positively because I love assigning my own meanings. Anyway, let's get right into it. As soon as How It Feels to Be Something On kicks in, you are met with a band that has taken their time off to change things up. The arpeggiated, slow-building intro of Pillars, complete with ambient feedback washes and wordless vocals, gives Jeremy's first vocals even more weight, now devoid of the scratchy screams and shouts that dominate Diary and LP2's runtime, replaced by a commanding and clear, yet still raw singing style, something that would appear in doses previously that has now become the norm. However, the quiet verses are offset by a continuously rising chorus, something that garners more power and atmosphere every time it comes around. Even still, Jeremy's voice remains passionate yet subtle, with the instrumentals doing much of the amplified heavy lifting. Enigk and Hoerner's guitars meet in a sparkling yet dark interplay throughout the song, while Goldsmith's drums beat away with forceful, driving power, accented by the winding bass work of one-off member Jeff Palmer, who only stayed with Sunny Day for this record. While Pillars isn't one of my top favorite songs on this record, something that is apparently a bit of a hot take, it sets the tone absolutely perfectly, delivering a mournful but anthemic introduction. It also contains some of my favorite lyrics on the album as a result, such as the bridge. A lyric that is only enhanced by Enigk's passionate and subtly anxious vocal performance. It feels cathartic in every sense of the word, a concept and sentence that will probably and almost definitely keep coming up as I discuss this album. Immediately following Pillars is the elegant Roses and Water, a song that I'd argue on some days is my favorite on the record. I need to be real before I start talking about the song though. Part of my fixation on this record also comes from its use of odd time signatures, and I only have a slight amount of shame in admitting that I have carried the thought of this album sounding like emo Tool for about 3 months now. Anyway, this song is where that really starts to show, once again featuring Enigk and Hoerner's guitars locked in a steady, arpeggiated strut. Enigk also utilizes his higher vocal range on this track, something that was previously exhibited through the kind of throat-burning screeches and shouts present on songs like Rodeo Jones and 48. In fact, I think Enigk's use of falsetto on this record is one of the clearest indicators of a separation from the band's earlier work. His voice is more refined, complemented by double-tracking his lower range with his higher range, especially on this song. It really makes me appreciate just how much of a stunning vocalist he is, and as much as I love his earlier work, I mean the pure aggression captured in songs like Escarabaide, or however you pronounce that, I don't even know how to pronounce it, what even is that word? It blows me away every time. But even still, I find myself more attached to this side of his voice. Hell, singing along with this record so much lately has helped me push my voice a bit more. The only problem with that is that I am not really that great of a singer, and it seems like Jeremy just kinda had this talent from the get-go and established it in different ways as he got older. Okay, sorry, I'm derailing like crazy. Anyway, Roses and Water is one of the least lyrical songs on the album, with its lyrics approaching something relating to God and spirituality in my eyes, but that's okay, because for me, even regardless of the lack of multiple lyrical substance, This is one of the most life-affirming songs on the record. The final minute of this song is one of the most outright passionate and, here's that word again, cathartic moments in their entire discography. William Goldsmith's drums almost take the spotlight, with crashing cymbals taking over much of the sonic palette, as Jeremy wordlessly chants in the background. If anything, it's the single moment in their discography that cements William Goldsmith as one of my favorite drummers, as if I needed more proof of that to begin with. A stellar track. Every Shining Time You Arrive finds Jeremy's acoustic side at work again, and is the closest thing to an outright ballad on this album, with the exception of maybe one more song. From what I read, it's possible that this song was actually intended for a solo follow-up to Return of the Frog Queen, but was retooled for Sunny Day Real Estate, and it wouldn't shock me if this was true. Strangely, it also comes across as one of the most optimistic songs that Jeremy and company ever wrote, seemingly indebted to an unnamed person or entity. It is soaked in past regrets and struggles, but turns to a joyful and uplifting tone by the end of the song. The organ solo about 2.5 minutes in is a sweet touch as well, and it just bleeds Jeremy's joy in my opinion. The final verse is genuinely one of the most awe-inspiring moments in the band's catalog, as this ballad suddenly rises into a roaring wave of guitar as Jeremy sings of the importance, and seriously, take a fucking drink every time I say this, catharsis of this person's presence in his life, every shining time they arrive. I mean, talk about a lyric that gives you chills, man! It captures the raw human feeling of love and comfort so perfectly. I don't know if this is about God, or a friend, or a romantic interest of Jeremy's, which is something that can be asked about a lot of their songs, but either way, I feel the message of this song on a deep, deep level. A level I possibly could not put into words. Two Promises, on the other hand, is, without a doubt in my mind, the darkest song on the record. At its core, it's a song about a breakup, narrating the struggles of the man in the relationship, alluding to the woman betraying his trust and maybe cheating on him in the process. The verses continue the album's recurring approach of arpeggiated guitar lines, apparently to the detriment of Jeremy's vocal performance. It's the only song from How It Feels to Be Something On to never be performed live due to the difficulty of performing the guitar line with the vocal. However, the choruses shift to a loud, pounding strike of guitar and drums as Jeremy, taking the role of the man in the song, pleads with this unknown woman. The chorus's lyrics perfectly match the tone of the instrumental, and the metaphorical walls mentioned in the lyrics seem to represent the man's mental state following this breakup. The final verse explicitly lays out the dark tone, however, as it becomes evident that the man plans to commit suicide, as he will, quote, never know peace in his lifetime. The metaphorical walls that try to be kept sound finally fall for good, as Jeremy yells, I hate to say this, but this song is very discreetly relatable to me. I have been in a place of loneliness and of numbing emotional mishmash, whether it be sadness or anger in different doses, and it pains me to know that this song may or may not come from a real place for Jeremy and or Dan, who wrote the lyrics to all the songs on How It Feels, in tandem. The crashing cymbals at the end of the song, as Jeremy shouts there is no sound, feels oxymoronically perfect. The music is loud and emphatic, while the lyric indicates silence, desertion, nothing. It's mind-blowing. The distorted and hard-panned guitar that opens 100 Million, a song that can operate as the band's mission statement, comes roaring out of the few seconds of silence following Two Promises and its dark, sorrowful story. 100 Million finds Jeremy angrily confronting the need to pay for basic human needs: shelter, food, clothing, the simplest things. Paying for the things that control your life: a whip on your back to break, the chain on your neck, a hole in the ground to place your bones. Paying for everything. Sunny Day Real Estate's name is derived from a Talking Heads song called Nothing But Flowers, but its meaning is more about how everything can be bought and sold, even a sunny day. Something that 100 Million manages to explore and capture in its 5-minute runtime so perfectly that this could be the only song they ever made and you'd still understand what they're coming from. The loud and passionately angry verses are washed away by a twinkling and soft chorus, where Jeremy taps into his falsetto once again, asking questions such as, who turned the light out? Who turned away? And can we own everything, including the moon and the sun and the stars? before launching immediately into the driving verse chords once again. However, the final chorus immediately ramps up the aggression from the verses, once again having Williams slam his cymbals as the guitar remains distorted and gravelly as it is during that hard-panned intro riff. Jeremy's falsetto becomes a beckoning call that is almost angelic, if not a tad bit defeated. This is a hard song for me to put into words, and I'm not sure why, but I do feel like I've said as much as I can with it. It's the perfect song for me to let out some emotion with in the car, through the power of pure musical punch. And now we come to the title track, How It Feels to Be Something On, which finds Jeremy confronting his actions and who he has become as a person, as well as the human condition itself. It feels like a dialogue between Jeremy and some kind of higher power, possibly becoming the most obvious declaration of Jeremy's devotion to Christianity since LP2. The lyrics are equal parts melancholic and equal parts hopeful. It comes across as an affirmation of humanity and how it is to be alive, or, how it feels to be something on. A weird kind of title and lyric that I do interpret as being about how it feels to be alive. To be something on, to be something moving, active, alive. The chorus on this song, by the way, might just be the best thing this band has ever recorded. It never fails to give me chills. It takes over my body and fills me with the world's biggest sense of unbridled hope, somehow eviscerating every ounce of pain and sorrow I've ever felt in my life. Probably sounds like an exaggeration, and it probably is, but that is legitimately how I feel about it. It is insane how music can do this to me, but I haven't heard a song that does that to me in so long. The instrumental is triumphant. The booming, passionate drumming that takes over as Jeremy wraps up the chorus is truly beautiful and cathartic. There, I said it again. Pure perfection. The track that put me off the most the first few times I listened, The Prophet. It put me off mostly because the first 3 minutes of this song consist of Jeremy's wordless vocalizations and some kind of foreign chant, supposedly inspired by world folk music, on top of a winding instrumental that gradually grows into a bright, shining release of tension as Jeremy's lyrical vocals finally enter after those 3 minutes pass. At first it felt a little long-winded, but eventually I gave up and let myself fall into it, and that intro now stands as the perfect tension builder for what eventually becomes a startlingly bursting release at the end of the song, bringing to mind the landscape of a sandstormy desert and the pilgrimages of many religious figures in years past. It's very possible that this song could be sung from the perspective of Jesus himself, but it also works in a way that plants Jeremy as the leader of a group of exiles or a post-apocalyptic world. This comes to fruition in the clearest way when the final 30 seconds of the song feature a frantic Jeremy shouting in an incoherent falsetto above the band's equally frantic music. He shouts about letting it all out. When the chains fall off, the walls fall down, when they break the seal, and their hearts pour out as the frozen ground comes alive around them. That moment right there is the single most cathartic moment in the entire Sunny Day Real Estate discography. If I had to save that C word for one moment in this review, it's right there. That scream Jeremy lets out at the very end, with seconds remaining in the song, is also something that takes over my body. I can't even lie to you guys. I shake when I'm sitting here at the computer listening to this song if I get too into the last 30 seconds. It is terrified, anxious preaching, indicative of the end of the world, or at the very least some kind of release from mortality. Fearful, yet freeing. Wistful melancholy returns to the forefront for guitar in video games, perhaps the most fitting song for a 20-something guy like myself who engages in both of those things. I remember reading and hearing this song title for the first time a few years ago and thinking about a band in 1998 writing about playing video games in the height of the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 era, which caught my attention, but I never checked it out until I listened to the album. Jeremy once again opens a dialogue with an unknown person, presumably a romantic partner, reminiscing on youthful experiences and finding happiness instead of chasing what is quote-unquote normal, while also confronting the fear of getting older and facing death. Jeremy and his unknown companion wish to shed the expectations of a social adult relationship and will stay at home instead to play guitar and video games. It's a heavy track at times for sure, but again, it's entirely cathartic. Removing yourself from what is perceived to be an obligation to act and perform a certain way is something I've struggled with in the past, and this song feels like a reinforcement of confidence in being yourself. It is entirely anthemic, and is probably one of the most definitive emo songs I've ever heard. An essential listen for anyone even skirting the line of being an outsider. Jeff Palmer's sparse and mournful bass opens The Shark's Own Private Fuck, a song often interpreted to be about Nate Mendel and his refusal to return to Sunny Day Real Estate during their 1997 reunion. Something that I feel is exacerbated by his replacement taking the center stage during the opening seconds, as if it were to be Mendel playing that bass line instead. Jeremy laments the supposed greed and lies of this unknown person, again assumed to be Mendel, opting instead to stay with Foo Fighters and remain a successful musician instead of throwing his hat in the ring to take a chance on a band that may not be destined for success or stardom. The subtle use of strings on this song, which I do believe are synth strings, really draws out the bitter but poignant nature of the song's lyrics. The song's chorus and eventual rushing end comes as Jeremy cries out, I see this line as representing the end of the youthful energy and passion that drove Sunny Day Real Estate in its early years, when Enigk was barely 20 years old, younger than I am now. It stands as an affirmation of the fact that the band and its members are growing older and have to accept the mature decisions that each of them has to make in regards to the band's existence and what they wish to do with their lives. I will admit that this song is my least favorite song on the album, simply because I have to choose one, but it really is a beautiful and tragic plea from one friend to another in hopes of reaching them. Even if it is not about him, Mendel did return for Sunny Day Real Estate's 2009 reunion, but did not return for the band's most recent reunion in 2022, effectively adding a happy ending to Jeremy's own lamentations about his refusal to return to the band. Lastly, at the end of this emotional storm of an album, we have Days Were Golden, which is, at the time of making this video, my favorite Sunny Day Real Estate song. The song finds the band, in a musical sense, at their most funereal and melancholic, as Enigk sings of a time long past, nostalgic yet bittersweet, in a place left desolate and abandoned, in a world devoid of anything of substance whatsoever, possibly driven to this desolation by greed or control, using the allure of gold as a metaphorical device. Flashes of optimism and hope appear and recur throughout, but the overall feel this song gives me is something of a mournful acceptance. The second part of the chorus, beginning with "Come Mama Now, Tell Me the Story," remains, in my mind, Sunny Day Real Estate's most heart-wrenching moment, as it could be interpreted as something more joyous, or something more akin to "Tell me what things used to be like before the world changed." A sliver of optimism and love of life comes forth in the line. Even ending the song on that oddly optimistic line after this chorus repeats a second time, with William Goldsmith's distorted, crushed drums riding the song out into a stunningly cathartic conclusion to an already cathartic album. This song does stuff to me, man. I feel simultaneously healed and comforted away from everything awful in life. It's a song where I can find beauty and hope in the sorrow, even if it's not intentional. The chimey guitar that rises in and out, the arpeggiated guitar that drives the melody of the song throughout, and Enigk's vocals that rise from the low, gruff range to ethereal falsetto combine to make something completely unlike anything else I've ever heard before. I cannot put all of my thoughts about this song into words because it is truly that important and affecting for me. If I ever get to see Sunny Day live, knowing that they end their shows with this song, it will probably be one of the most important experiences of my life. Jeremy Enigk, Dan Hoerner, William Goldsmith, and Jeff Palmer created something truly special when they created this album and this song. So I know this review is a little light on the background on the making of this album, but no matter how hard I scour the internet, interviews and fan sites from 2001 to find information, I just can't find much. I'd love to hear as much insight as possible into the songwriting on this record, their use of time signatures, the fact that Dan doesn't sing on any songs on this record, what motivated Jeremy to move towards the more angelic vocal sound than the previous records. It's all a mystery to me, and I'm craving any information I can find on it as much as possible. Now, I can probably say this part with it being mostly obvious, but I want to talk a bit about my experience with this album, and how the love grew so intensely. This is, at the time of recording, in my top 10 albums of all time. I have not heard a record like this in about 3 years, to the point that I take out an album in my top 10 to put a new one in. That's how I know this is a special experience that, frankly, I needed in my life. Mentally, I'm doing very well this year, but even still, this album feels like a compensation for every mental health battle I've fought over the last 6+ years. Like a complete and total understanding of what I've been through and will probably continue to experience for the rest of my life, just as a result of the human nature. Pure therapeutic tendencies contained within a 45-minute album from 1998. Who could have guessed? I know this review has been long enough already, so I will keep it short. How It Feels to Be Something On as an album is one of the most well-crafted and well-executed records I've ever listened to in every respect. There is passion, emotional depth, and pure artistry embedded into its DNA, and I would be hard-pressed to think of more than a handful of records that I would consider to be on this level. Remarkable in every way, and a record that I will likely cherish for the rest of my life, or at the very least, a very long time. How It Feels to Be Something On is listed as one of my essential albums. At the time of recording, it is currently sitting at number 7 on the list of my favorite albums of all time. With that, I give Sunny Day Real Estate's How It Feels to Be Something On a 10 out of 10.